So please join me in welcoming the full panel from the Barbados, from the battlefield to the boardroom, what military cyber leaders can teach CISOs. I now hand over to Lieutenant Commander Neil Matthews, who will moderate the discussion.
Thank you very much for the First of all, I do apologize to my CABC family for not wearing a CABC shirt. I gotta represent one person at a time. But thank you everybody for taking the time. Thank you Neil for having this conference and actually inviting the team to showcase what the Barbados Defence Force does. We are highlighted at the wrong time when something wrong happens. So it's good to have an opportunity to show you what we do that's right. So everybody here works in some sort of cyber capacity outside of the BDF. Well, we all have functions within the BDF in the cyber realm. And I would add as well, drones as well. Donovan is OIC drones, I'm operational officer for drones. Jason flies, Ashel flies, Glenn sort of looks on. So, without further ado, it's ironic we have the first question I prepared for the team. And this panel was reconstituted about 3 or 4 times before today. Roland can tell you he got one set of names, and then he got another set of names, and that's because standard BDF, something happens and somebody has to do something or somebody has to go somewhere. So, no battle plan survives the first contact with the enemy. What can CISOs learn from this? I'm going to toss this one to Glenn.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much, Commander Matthews, and welcome all of you to this panel this morning. So I'm going to start by giving a little bit of background and then expound on what this statement can teach CISOs. So firstly, I want to point out that this statement is attributed to Helmuth von Moltke. Moltke. He was a person born into minor nobility in what was then Prussia. And he was a very thoughtful and bookish person who went on to join the military. And one of the things that he brought to the military was deep interest in planning and being very strategic about how he approached battles and so on. So he is credited, his strategies and so on are credited for winning the Franco-Prussian War and the Austro-Prussian Wars. So he was critical to winning 2 major battles at that particular point in time. He went on to become Field Marshal and the Chief of the General Staff of the Prussian Army. So I say all of that to say he was a very successful military leader. And through all of his years of research and planning, one of the things or the main points that he was trying to get across was that plans are not static and that one needs to be adaptable based on the situation that you find on the ground when you're actually going into battle. So what we can do is we can break that thought down into several different areas. And the first one that I want to highlight is that is meant for you to build resilience and not perfect protection. So the point there is that the point of cyber readiness and everything that you do really should not be focused on preventing all attacks. The reality is that malactors will always have more time on their hands than busy CISOs and people who work in the security environment. You have all your time is split between many different things. Right? And malactors have nothing else to do but sit around, plot and plan to do untoward things. So your focus really ought to be on building resilience and how can I quickly recover from an incident. So the point here, or the learning that can be transferred over to CISOs from this particular point is that we really want to have a strong incident management capability. You want to ask questions like how quickly can I detect an incident? How effectively can I contain it? How quickly can I recover? And one of the things is that you'll find that the best organizations are not necessarily the ones that seek or attempt to prevent every single thing, but the ones that are able to recover very, very quickly. Right? So that follows naturally into the second point, which talks about the focus on making quick decisions on the uncertainty. So when an incident unfolds in the beginning, you know very little, but you have to have the ability to make quick decisions, and you have to be able to pivot based on new information that you learn as you proceed through the response to the incident. So that that ability to be quick, decisive, and to use information that you have to make the best determination at the time, that is also critical. Right? The other thing that is highlighted by the statement by Vermonte is the whole notion of exercising beyond the playbook. So it is very, very critical. So military organizations tend to practice and train a lot. Right? Fundamental to what militaries do is maintain a sense of readiness. So that is a lesson that can be extracted directly over to CISOs. You have to practice, do tabletop exercises, do drills, all of those things to make sure that when the real situation happens, that people are practiced, they're ready, and they're crisp. Okay? The fourth point that I want to make is that in these things you must expect communication failures. Right? In the midst of an incident, it is possible that your email system could be affected, your phone system could be affected, and any other communication device could be affected, your team could be dispersed. So that leads into the fifth point, which is that you have to empower your frontline teams. And from the military side of things, when a commander issues a set of orders to do a particular operation, one of the things that we spend a lot of time working on in the military context is to try to understand the commander's intent. The point of that is to make sure that you understand very clearly what it is that the commander wants, what his objectives. And the reason for that is if you have a clear understanding of the objective, even if you are cut off from communications from higher, you have the necessary guardrails, the left and right guides, as we call them, to operate efficiently, even if, as I said, you don't have connection with the upper levels. The other thing that you need to assume is that the attackers will adapt. And that is another point in which the adaptability comes in. Because every defensive action you take will trigger a reaction on the side of the attacker. So, for example, when you introduce MFA, for example, the attacker may target session tokens. So, as I said, when you put one thing in place, the attackers will pivot. So, as a result of that, you too have to be adaptable and flexible in your response strategy. So, to do that, what we suggest is that you measure agility, right? So you don't necessarily want to just measure things like the number of vulnerabilities patched and that kind of new static thing. What you want to do is to think about what was the mean time to detect a compromise, what was the mean time to contain it, etc., etc. So you want to focus on the things that actually point towards how it is that you're doing to manage and to contain the situation that you find yourself in. And the last point that I want to make on this topic is that culture matters more than technology. Within the military context, we like to say that 10 men properly led can defeat 100 without a head. And therefore, what we're suggesting for CISOs is that they create a culture where, for example, people do not fear reporting bad news, and as a result are slow with decision making, and that that they don't trust team members and so on. It is critical that you create a team space where people are comfortable to operate and do the best things, make the best decision possible. So if you want to bring all of that together to answer the question, to summarize, I want to say no security strategy survives first contact with an attacker unchanged. So as I said, you have to be willing to adapt. And therefore, the goal of cybersecurity is not perfect prevention, but rapid adaptation.
Thank you, Glenn. I feel like that was a TED Talk in one. We can wrap up, right? Like the part where we spoke about culture, in CIBC we follow a mantra also about culture. Culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? So I love that lead in on culture there. And as Glenn said, I know people smile when you talk about the 10 men beating 100, but the mantra in the military is that everybody knows everybody's job. You don't have to know it perfectly, but you have to understand and expect what your teammate is expected to do. And if he's not there, you gotta be able to jump in. So if the boss take a bullet and he gotta lay down and can't get it further, somebody gotta take over and move on. We don't just say, well, what we can do here? Because we practice and we practice and we practice and we practice even the boss taking a bullet. All right? Okay, next question. Donovan, this one is for you. Military commanders are trained to make high consequence decisions with intelligence and under significant operational pressure. How can CISOs apply that same command mindset in cyber risk, incident response, and communicating with the board when an organization is under attack?
I know feel the pressure. Thanks, Commander. I'm going to answer that question by giving you an opening quote. And I would tell everyone in the room that everyone here knows technology, correct? That's a yes, not a head. Good. But technology may detect the attack, but leadership determines whether the mission survives it. Technology may detect the attack, but leadership determines whether the mission survives it. And to piggybacking off of my colleague Glenn here, military is about leadership. It's about leadership under pressure, which is fundamental. And more importantly, it's about protecting that mission. Making decisive decisions with information and ensuring that people understand, as Glenn said, the commander's intent, even when in the operating environment changes. You're going to ask yourself, how does this translate then to a CISO? Just like in the military, and military soldiers, commanders, military is about discipline. Therefore, cybersecurity also demands that same discipline. It demands that same discipline because why? You got situational awareness. You have intelligence-led decision making. You also have defense in depth, which are clear, and you have also clear, or you should have clear, defined command structures. Glenn also said we rehearse. So as CISOs you must rehearse your incident response structure, or look at your incident response framework. Okay? So therefore, people, whether you're on the battlefield or inside the cyber operating center or in the boardroom, the fundamentals remain the same. The fundamentals remain the same. You understand the threat, you establish command and control, you protect critical capabilities and maintain operation continuity and act decisively. Do not wait until a crisis. I'm assuming that everyone here is from the Caribbean. We have exception, my friend, good friend Jason. But the Caribbean people, we are reactive. We want to react when something happens. True? Good, we got to stop that. We have to be proactive. So therefore, don't wait until the crisis to determine who has authority, what must be protected, or how decisions will be made. Practice it. It won't make perfect, but it should be permanent. Those arrangements must be already understood, exercised, and most importantly, trusted. For the CISOs, that also means translating technical battle into language the board can act upon. So the board can basically want to know what is threatened, what is the business impact, it can stop me making money or not. Can we continue operating? What must we protect immediately to have business continuity? And then finally, the board can want to know what decisions do you want me to make now? What does leadership want to do? Ultimately, and as I close here to answer this question, the connection between the battlefield and the boardroom is this. Resilience is not simply the ability to prevent an attack. However, it is the ability to absorb the attack, maintain command, maintain focus, sustain the mission, adapt faster than your adversary, recover at speed, but still be stable, and most importantly, emerge stronger. So learn from your mistakes. So as much education that we do in our own private applications, somebody can still click the link. Somebody can still click the link. Somebody can still go on this site because it looks pretty, or it appeals to us without doing due diligence. Okay? So that's why we must continue to rehearse. I will close how I ended. Technology may detect the attack, but leadership determines whether we survive it. Thanks, Commander.
Thank you, Donovan. A couple of points to add there. Communication to the board. A lot of us, highly technical, we love to bring highly technical terms to talk to people. At the end of the day, the board don't know cybersecurity and don't know IT. So talk English, talk something that they can understand. As Jonathan said, how much money we gonna lose if we don't act now? That's what I love to hear. That's all I'm interested in, the board, money. The company can stand or ain't gonna stand. If you show them that making this decision fast gonna put we through, that's where we're gonna go. All right? Thank you very much, sir. All right. We crossed the borders. I know there's a session later about women in cybersecurity, so I actually had 3 women, and one traveled and got sick. One got called to duty this morning. Not saying that we're left with Ashel, but she will stand strong.
Last woman standing.
And she will stand strong and represent the women in cybersecurity in BDF. So just the point, we have a lot more cybersecurity leaders in the BDF who are women. As I highlighted, Captain Gail Morgan, she's currently the SOC manager at the CERT manager, at the National Cybersecurity. And then I have Lieutenant Sadia Seeley, who's my second in command in BDF for IT. So there are women in the force, not only these grumpy looking fellas here. The left of launch strategy. In counterinsurgency, you win by building schools, not just dropping bombs. What is the school building equivalent in cybersecurity that reduces risk more effectively than buying another firewall? Ashel?
I'm excited for this question because I get to talk about my favorite concept or topic in security, users. So, carrying on this analogy, you build hospitals in the country you're in because you want to connect with the citizens, with the civilians, right? The equivalent of that in security would be your SETA program, your security, education, training and awareness program. It's really, really important. And the difference between education, training, and awareness is also really important, the distinction between them, because they're not just 3 words that mean the same thing. They mean very distinct things. Everybody in your organization needs awareness. And when I say everybody, I mean everybody. Because your security guard is the one that's going to leave the back door open because a dude in a FedEx uniform with a clipboard asked him if he could, right? We need to extend awareness training to even the people that we didn't traditionally believe needed it. Of course, your security professionals need to be trained. They have to maintain their certifications. They have to have that formal security training so they think like security professionals. And then you have to give various groups of users the education that is relevant to them. So everybody's talking about business email compromise now. We have to have a specific track for executives. They have to understand why they in particular are at risk, the types of threats that will be directed at them, and what they need to do. And especially how their leadership affects security culture in the organization that they lead, right? And that's different, obviously, to the training that the security guard is gonna get, right? So your setup program is the way you engage with your citizens, in this analogy, your users, right? It's how you empower them to not be what we as security professionals used to think users are the greatest problem, right? It's how you, I guess, empower them to take on their role as part of the security machine of the organization. Now, I want to mention something that I also think is really important when it comes to setup programs, and you're not going to read it in your textbooks. Organizations that are large and have, I would say, a high regulatory burden tend to lose the forest for seeing the trees, right? Because you have to do this setup program. The control says there's a setup program that must be in place. We may hire a vendor or create this educational package, and then we spend all of our energy making sure that every last person in the organization, we bribe them, we cajole them, we threaten them, and make sure that they do this training every year. And I think that is, I don't want to say it's a mistake, but it's short-sighted. Because we are talking about people. Technical controls are easy. You put the firewall in, and you make sure the firewall has the correct rules, you're good to go. People are different. How your users feel about your training directly affects how effective that training is. And the point of a setup program is to empower users to take on their security responsibility. If your users hate your training, it is monotonous, it is boring, they feel it is punitive, all of those things, all of those feelings about your security education, training and awareness program directly impacts how effective it is. So you will continue to train people every year, and your reports to your regulators and your board and your whatever will say we have trained these people, and they will not behave as if they have been trained. That is really, really important, because you don't just want to be able to demonstrate that you have trained people. You want people to not necessarily enjoy the training, but to understand why it's being done, to understand that it's important, and take the knowledge of what you're trying to teach them and apply it to their behavior within your organization and even outside, right? Because a person who has good offset on Facebook also has good offset when they log into your VPN. Thanks.
All right. Sound real professional, that offset term. Sounds military. I want to highlight here also, focusing on the users, I don't know if I'm talking about the board, is quite important. In CIDC, we focus on making sure that our board leaders, our executive leaders have specific training, because they're the people that are going to be targeted. In the BDF, our chief of staff actually went through cybersecurity training. So he has an actual cybersecurity certification, right? So we gotta make sure that leadership actually understands when we come to the table here what we're talking about and why it's important. Gone are the days for us in the military about bullets and bombs. If everybody's watching the war with Ukraine, it's all about drones. It's all about cyber, right? You don't got a lot of men rushing across the field with guns. That skirmish is once in a blue moon. right? So cyber really has to take its place and has taken its place in the domain of war, right? Okay, not to be left out. Jason's been sitting there patiently for his question. You've come from the civilian world into the military. What have you taken back to your organization?
All right, I'm somebody who learns by example, and I'm gonna start out with a story today. And I don't think I've ever shared it with you all either, so.
Remember, this is being recorded.
That's right. Let's cast our minds back. This unit started very early in 2020. What also started in 2020, COVID. Do y'all remember those care packages that the BDF had sent out? Right. So I was involved with that. We had this great assembly line, and my job was 2 bags of rice and 4 cans of tuna. I receive the bag, I put the products in, and it goes down. I didn't really think anything of that, but it was like, yeah, this assembly line thing, very military, very precise, it gets the job done. Cool. Fast forward now to National Heroes Day in 2022. I was at St. Anne's Fort collecting my kit to go to Belize to do trade winds, and this was going to be the first trade winds exercise that had cyber attached to it. So I was very excited. I got a call in the morning. Yeah, Jason. So this is my colleague from Trinidad. Nobody really can get to anything inside of Massey Distribution or Massey Stores. And they are seeing a ransom note. So there went my trip to Belize. And I was then instead of going on a plane to Belize, I went on a plane to Trinidad instead. So after dealing with that incident, and we were given the all clear that we could start to re-onboard the machines, I had a task now of how do I wipe and reload everything on, it was about 1,500 laptops. We don't have any fancy software that re-images anything, right? And then it immediately clicked to me, assembly line. The same assembly line that I saw for the care packages for COVID. We had a massive training room, probably the size of this room, plenty trestle tables. I said, look, all right, this is what we're gonna do. Your job is in charge of taking inventory of the laptops coming in. You do the wiping, you do the reinstalling, you install some more software, and the assembly line worked. Everybody had a specific tasking to do. It was very straightforward. I mean, it still took a long time, but it worked. And I think that's one of the main things that I was influenced by from early on in this. Because, like I said, the unit started in 2020. We probably had 1 or 2 meetings before we were in lockdown. So, now, with that story, this is what I have learned from it. So, I am always a person who has a plan B for everything, as opposed to the person I was pre-COVID, where the only plan B I had was to go through the KFC drive-thru because they never have what I want. Second thing is, I am now more assertive in my decision-making. People know that you're in the military. Yes, you're a CISO. You're expected to, show leadership and authority. But when they hear that you're in the military, they really, really expect you to stand up and to show up. We talked about drills, desktop testing, all of that you're supposed to do as a CISO. But I think I've added a different lens to it. And I'll give you another 2 examples, because like I said, I'm somebody who learns by example. Last year, stuff was starting to kick off in Venezuela. You can actually see Venezuela from Trinidad. Massey Store's head office shares the same driveway as the port of Trinidad. And so instead of doing the usual desktop tests with ISP fail, power fail, you have an earthquake, whatever. We're going to start looking at something different, casting a national lens on things. So now we're looking at geopolitical. So we did a geopolitical desktop test, and out of that, we determined, all right, look, the infrastructure for Massey Storage Trinidad has no right being literally next door to the port. So that's something that was changed. In St. Lucia as well, did something, again, a bigger lens on St. Lucia. In St. Lucia, we have a 73 or 74% market share in St. Lucia for groceries. If something went wrong with Massey Storage St. Lucia, that is not a Massey problem. We can't make money problem. That is a national problem, right? So out of that, we realized that we need to spend a little bit more time on St. Lucia, make sure that their BCP plan is up to muster, do some different tabletop testings for them, because if the supermarkets can't open, people can't eat. And that's a much bigger problem than just a Massey organizational issue. Next thing is documentation. Anybody loves documentation? The military is big on documentation, big on the after action reports, big on playbooks, because as the commander said, there needs to be somebody else besides you who needs to do your job, or you need to do their job as well. So again, all of the things that the CISO should do, but now you're seeing you have to do it, and you have to have these things in place. When I went down to Trinidad, I was CISO for 1 month before I had that incident in Trinidad. So there were no playbooks, there were no nothing. My boss was literally on a ventilator in the hospital. So, you know, it's important to have documentation that somebody can perform these tasks. We're good at having things in our head, and we need to get them out onto, let's call it paper, and I think it should be on literal paper, because as Cameron was Glenn or Ling said, communications may fail. It's good to have it in a SharePoint thing somewhere, but if you have no internet, you can't get to your plans, right? So, and it comes back to always having that plan B. So I think those are the 4 points that I would say have influenced my role as a CISO coming from the military.
Thank you, Jason. First of all, it's good to see that we talk about a plan, and a plan for a plan, and a plan for a plan. And that's how the military works. We got like another plan for the plan for the plan for the plan. Because if we got them in fighting the war, that last man gonna know was the plan. Right? The other part is I will be sending my a consulting fee, because evidently what you've learned in the military has saved them some money, so we can stop paying you. Alright, so we've talked a lot, and I don't know how much more time we have, but I think it's time we open the floor to some questions from you, our esteemed audience. And don't be afraid of us, because we're in the military, we're all smiling, so we didn't come wearing uniform for that particular reason. We wanted to be as casual as possible to make sure that we're all as comfortable as possible. So feel free to fire away, nothing too hard. Well, don't fire. Ask a question.
Can you tell us who your question is for before you start?
Morning. Okay. Good morning. This could be for I think Donovan or Jason, or basically both of you could answer, because it's about reporting to the board. What would you say is a major challenge that you have in data collection in terms of developing KPIs, KRIs, etc., collecting that data? So a challenge in collecting that data itself and then reporting it to the board for them to understand cyber risk and its security posture.
Thanks for that. I will go first to that. The hardest thing is getting persons to understand what they want. You have to get the board. So once the board understands what they want, then you can collect that data. And you also have to know where that data is housed. And once you know where that data is housed, you can then collect that data and then upscale it or send it upward to the board to hopefully make an informed decision. In order for the board to make an informed decision, they must understand the particular crisis they're in. They must understand the nature of the business. And once you have that done, then you should be good. I don't know if Jason wants to add anything to that.
We don't have much of a challenge in collecting the data. However, there is, I would say, education to the board on what should be collected. When we started collecting, when we were told we needed to collect certain KRAs, we had to give some pushback to say that what you think we should be collecting is probably not what we should be collecting. And that is people being influenced by somebody who told them they need to collect XYZ, which is not the best thing that they should be doing. The KRAs are not necessarily challenging for us to collect because we know how to get them, but it is bringing it over in a non-technical way, but at the same time trying not to dumb it down to be insulting to people. And there is that fine line there. And also, I would say, go ahead and start to interpret the data for them to be able to expect questions that they will be having for you, so that you're not caught off guard in the boardroom.
So Jason's extremely correct there, and you must make sure that an informed decision is being made to achieve the objective. Remember, you got to survive the mission. You got to emerge. You don't want to win the battle, you want to win the war. All right?
One follow-up, Jason. You mentioned that you would have advised on what KRAs should be collected. How did you go about advising them on what KRAs? What wisdom did you use in order to know which KRAs you should be collecting and reporting on?
All right, so I'll give you an example. It's not necessarily which should be collected, but I would say the way that it is calculated. So an example for me would be vulnerabilities. They would like to know, how many vulnerabilities do we have? That's not a KRA. That's a number, right? Yes, it is measurable, but the number itself does not mean anything. And there is no way that you could compare that number in Trinidad, which has thousands of machines, versus that number in St. Vincent, which has maybe 100 machines. So coming up with a way of saying, all right, well, we need to set a baseline, or we need to turn it into a percentage, or something like that. So we had to sort of change some of the KRAs to suit. And it's also important to understand that this is not something that is set in stone forever and ever. This is something that will evolve. It's probably not good to evolve every month, right? But at least at the turn of the financial year, take that opportunity to say, all right, these KRAs need to be changed to something else, or the threshold needs to be changed to something else.
All right, thank you.
So if I may, while Christina tries to get her mic sorted.
Ladies first, man.
Okay, my apologies.
This is Women in Technology. Remain calm.
Thank you so much. Asha, this question is not for you. Not going to put you on the spot.
That's later.
To any of the panel. So we talked about having a plan and a plan and a plan. And we said that resilience is not simply the ability to maintain the attack, but adapt and emerge. We spoke about mean time to delivery. What are some of the actions that organizations can do today to move from being reactive to proactive to improve the mean time to delivery for events of interest?
So, I'll let you come in after me, Donnie. I think the first thing we as cybersecurity professionals have to do is understand the business that we support. A lot of us are professionals. We sit in our box, but we don't really understand what we are supporting. And that's where it's a bit more important. When you understand the business you are supporting, you are able to make decisions in your space that supports the business. Just like how Jason spoke about how he was able to change things around in Trinidad because of circumstances around it, right? So the first and foremost is understanding your business before you apply the technology.
And to add to what Neil is saying, once you understand the business, then you can understand the threat landscape. Once you understand the threat landscape, you can then plan, adapt, and practice. Okay, because look what's happening now. Going into the PQC world, you go into the post-quantum AI world, everything's AI. So you got agentic AI, you got all this become either your friend, your ally, or your foe. How do you plan? How do you adapt? And then how you practice? And then once you do that, you can then implement your own, change your policies. So every entity represented here should really have an AI policy. Right? Once you have that AI policy, you can then look to plan and improve your business. So what Neil is saying, you have to understand what your environment is and then what the new threats are, because the threats are evolving as we speak.
Thank you.
So if I may.
Sure you may, Charles.
So a lot of us would assume that, in fact, let me put the question. One, how important is it to report the truth of a situation? And then how, first of all, Neil as a commander, how do you receive that truth? And then for any other person on the board, how do you report that truth?
So, that's a good one. The truth is the truth. There's no way to sway, slant it, put it in any other format. But as you said, it is how you report it. At the end of the day, and I'll give you an example, when BDF was mandated to do the COVID stuff, we weren't the Ministry of Health. We weren't the Ministry of Transport. We had to figure it out. But the truth was, we had a population that that needed support, and somebody had to step up to do it. Now, sometimes the people at the top don't want to hear the truth, and I think that's where you're going. I might be wrong, Charles. Yeah, they don't want to hear the truth. But you have to tell them the truth. But also you have to coach it, and for us as CISOs, there's not a time span, there's a short time span for certain jobs in technology. So it depends on where you are in your career, how truthful or how bombastic you can put on the truth. But reality is reality, and a threat is a threat. And you have to make sure that you explain in clear layman's terms, this is our situation. If we don't do this, this will happen. I, the CISO, am not Jesus. I can't solve this problem. I can fight it. My team, you, everybody else can fight the problem. But just like Donnie said, our adversaries will adapt. So it's like firefighters going out to fight campfires. Sometimes it's just park the truck and let the things burn. You know why? Because then they're going to come back tomorrow fight that same fight again. Because it ain't worth the fight. Just monitor it, make sure you contain it, that it doesn't get into a populated area. But it might be best to, and I'm not saying let your business burn, by the way. but sometimes it might be best to let actions follow the path to understand and let things happen so that people can understand. And sometimes, and I'll be like Jason, I give a story. This story, I think I can't get fired for this one because I left that company 30 years ago. But a friend of mine used to work in an organization. And once upon a time, a senior vice president walked by and said, "We got all these IT men. I don't know what these men just do. These men just go here sitting down all day." And a morning, this friend came to work, and the Novell netware, so Charles, you know how far this was, the Novell netware 4.1 server was down. And his boss rushed in. "We need to bring it up, we need to get it still." And my friend said, "Calm down, boss, we got it under control." And everybody in the team was like, let me go. And my friend said, "Nah, calm down." So after about an hour of everybody in the organization pacing outside the IT door, my friend brought back the server. Right? Rest assured, there was never another comment about why you needed IT ever again. Right? So sometimes you gotta let the truth hurt. Don't back down, the truth got hurt. But it depends on where you are in your career. So if you were like a month in like Jason, that was not a good thing to be like, hollering for murder, why you always me and that sort of stuff. You know, pick up a big camera, but me now, years into this, there we go. My friend, sorry.
And let me add one thing to what Neil is saying. The first question, because I only qualified to answer the first one, why you should tell the truth. Reporting it and all of that, I leave that to these guys. The cybersecurity nerds in the room might be aware of a recent trend of legislation that makes CISOs and board members, in some cases, criminally responsible for breaches, right? If you think about it, about what we do in our role, a CISO is not going to be sent to prison or made to pay whatever because there was a breach. That will happen because you lied to regulators or you lied to the board. Because you said that some control was in place that you knew was broken, was demonstrably broken, and you didn't report it. So if you need a reason why you should tell the truth, look at what has happened with computer misuse regulation, privacy regulation in the region. We always follow those trends. It is only going to be a matter of time. It might not be in our careers, depending on how old some of us here are. But it's only going to be a matter of time until those sorts of laws are in place in the region as well, right? Especially at the rate we're going with breaches.
I want to add here, our regulators are talking to one another. Once upon a time, everybody used to do their own thing, but now you realize that all the regulators are sort of coming to you with the same questions, especially for those of us in the FIs and insurance and those areas, financial stuff. They're really talking to one another a lot. So you gotta make sure you tell the truth, because if you slant in one country and then say something in another country, you can get caught up.
All right, so the only caveat, not so much a caveat, the only thing I would add to that though is, I think it's clearly established that you have to tell the truth, right? That is non-negotiable. But what you say will be determined by the audience to whom you're speaking. Right? So what you say to the board and the information you disclose there is going to be different from the information you disclose to a regulator versus the information you disclose to the public. But that being said, bottom line is you have to report the truth. There's no option.
Pleasant good morning to all. My question is for the entire panel. As an educator, we would have had some breaches in the school system, right? And it was mentioned about knowing the threat landscape. Ashal, you would have alluded to the fact that you could put all of the firewalls, all the different systems and frameworks in place, but users will be users. And coming out of the conference so far, you are hearing, or well, in my experience so far, you are hearing that users are your biggest asset and liability at the same time. When it comes to some people that only know how to use Word, Excel, PowerPoint, shopping online and stuff like that, how do you, as cyber professionals, train someone like me who just dabbles a little bit in it? I am not great at it like the panel or some of the audience in here. So most of what I know about cybersecurity is through training. And I think that is something that can be done in the education space with Google and all of the other stuff. So my major question is, once we know the threat landscape, how do I, as an educator / IT coordinator, put it out there for my colleagues, not only at the school that I'm at, but sometimes I'm called away to fix another issue at another school. What do I do to make myself better, and by extension, my colleagues? And this is open to any member of the panel. Thanks.
So that's a good question. I can open the body here. But you start by saying, read, educate yourself, understand. So once you read it, you get educating. You then have a repository. So a good friend of mine who's actually around the commander's age, who's Albert Einstein, said that you cannot solve a problem with the same level of thinking. Okay? What that means is, if you want to move this table, too heavy, that means you're going to get stronger in order to move that table. And then from once you have a repository, you then get experience. Once you get that experience, you then know how to operate. You don't know how. Then your decision making to mitigate, to remediate, and then to eradicate will become even faster. Okay? To go across to address your other party question in terms of users, put a policy in place. So in all other financial institution, telecom institution, web institution, they should have, in the financial institutions, for example, you have the anti-money laundering examination they have to do every year. If you don't do it, you log out the system. Put that in place for cybersecurity for the educators. You have to do cybersecurity training, complete the exam, and then do a test. Who failed it? Cool, thanks, no problem. You gotta do this until you pass it. And that's the only way. So you learn by repetition. Repetition. It's just like you're an educator. Whether you don't fail the exam, what you do? We say give it an F. You gotta come back and repeat. I repeat until you get it right. Remember, all of us spoke about training. Whether it's cybersecurity training, whether it's bombs and bullets training. That's the only way you can get better.
So I just want to add one final thing. Meet them at their level. You can talk to this room about cybersecurity at a certain level. But if you are talking to the average person, you gotta talk to them at something that hits home to them. And you hit it when you talked about shopping online. You use that as an example for anybody, they can get it. They can get it. I think we're at time. I do apologize. We would love to stay longer, but we want to thank you and take the opportunity also before we wrap up to highlight that